This is The Edge of Excellence, empowering people to shape the future. Let's inspire, innovate, and explore together.
I'm Jess DeForge, and today's episode is about something deeply human, the stories we tell ourselves and how those stories shape our careers, leadership, and lives.
And I'm Bryon Beilman, and joining us today is Dora Farkas, storyteller, author, leadership advisor, and someone who has built her career from intuition, reinvention, and business narrative. Dora has helped founders reshape their company's stories, co-authored two books with a CEO to humanize a brand, and built a six-figure consulting company rooted in her own personal experiences. I've personally seen Dora's leadership in action through her work at Toastmasters and leading network events through her work at Connex Ecommerce. Dora, welcome to the Edge of Excellence.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Bryon, for having me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here.
Yes, I'm so thrilled to have you here. And Dora, before we dive into today's topic, I'd actually love for you to walk us through your background and the journey that led you to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, interestingly enough, my background is in science and engineering, and it sounds a little counterintuitive that that's what actually led me to my work around intuition. And what happened was that I was working on my Ph.D. in biological engineering, and that was probably the most difficult thing that I've done in my life, because especially towards the end, I was having a lot of health issues, and there were issues with my research. And after almost 6 years, I really thought I would need to drop out.
Wow.
Yeah. But there was something in me that said, I need to keep going. Like, I need to give it a little bit more time. And what happened was that because of my health issues, I couldn't type for long periods of time. I was forced to take breaks. So I would go on a lot of walks. And I discovered that when I went on the walks, that's when I had the intuitive insights about how to tie pieces of my dissertation together. So places where I felt really stuck, where I felt like, for example, if I had conflicting data in one section, then I thought, oh, like I can't write this. I have to like tear up this chapter. But when I went on a walk, I got this intuitive insight. Oh, that's how I can put this together. That's how I can make that narrative. And I discovered that I get these intuitive insights when I'm not in front of my computer.
No, I think that's so strong. And is something I've heard, other people on our team talk about even, when you're so deeply involved in a project, to your point, it sounds counterintuitive to step away when you feel like you've hit a block of some sort, like you need to like stay there and dive into it further. But it's actually the stepping away, getting some fresh air and, getting a new perspective that really helps unlock solutions to problems. So I love that, is how you kind of worked through those problems that you were having to get your PhD.
Yeah, it was really amazing. Yeah, that's actually what helped me to finish.
No, I think that's so healthy. That's so healthy and so important for people to hear.
I was also just in the fact that you're so in tune with your intuition is somewhat of a superpower, I think, because matter of fact, I'm reading this book. It's called The Gift of Fear, and it was really about how intuition is almost nearly always right, and logic sometimes clouds things up. And in this, there's this person is talking about using intuition to keep yourself safe. And so, but I'm just into this. But now how timely that we have someone who's really in tune with their intuition.
No, absolutely. So Dora, when people hear you speak or they read your work, what do you most want them to walk away with?
What I want them to walk away with is that we each have a story that we tell ourselves. And most of the time, those stories are not true. Like we tell ourselves, I cannot write a book, I'm not capable of going for that job, etc. And we can each choose to tell ourselves a different story. But the story we're going to tell ourselves has to be something that is true to us. So we can't say, oh, yes, I am capable of a job that we know is out of our reach, because we're not going to believe it. But going back to my dissertation, the story that I started telling myself every day was, I can go from A to B today. Like, that's it. I'm just going to get this little piece done. And that felt very believable. Or for example, another great story you can tell yourself is, when I need help, I can find people to support me. That's also very believable. So these are the stories that are more empowering and more true, that can actually lead you to your end result that you would love to have.
No, absolutely. And when we chatted before jumping onto this recording, you had said this statement, if you change your story, you can change your life. And I walked away from that call like feeling so empowered by that statement. And it's something that I've been really marinating on a bit since that conversation. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, I keep going back to my dissertation, but that's actually why I'm here in the first place. So I had that choice, am I going to drop out or am I going to give it another go? And really the only thing that I did was change that statement. Like, what can I do today? Like, what is that small A to B that I can do today? So that led me to finish my dissertation, which led me to then work in the pharmaceutical industry and then write my first book, The Smart Way to Your Ph.D. And then that put me on a path to creating my six-figure consulting business, and then other career opportunities, as well as my other two books. So that one little change just put me on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about kind of these smaller steps that kind of helped you break what might have seemed rather daunting into something actionable. We were just having another conversation on a different episode about something similar when it comes to business and it being overwhelming sometimes to think about goals within business and how really it's about, kind of dialing in and breaking things up into smaller, more targeted goals. So, from what you're saying, that applies to, your personal life as well, which is so important to be able to do.
Yeah. I mean, almost anything I've achieved was always like the small things stacked together.
Now, is this something that you had the skill set intrinsically to be able to do for yourself, or did you rely on others or mentors to kind of help you think about that path or think about ways to break, something that felt really overwhelming into smaller pieces?
Yeah, I've always had mentors. During graduate school, I had wonderful mentors, but there's only so much that they can do. Like at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to execute the plan. The mentor can tell me what are the small pieces, how to break it up, but I need to be the one to do it. So yeah, I mean, of course, I had mentors all throughout my career in education.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. Now, you mentioned that changing your story really impacted your path, which led you to writing your first book, The Smart Way, to your PhD. And that book has sold over 30,000 copies. Can you talk a little about the inspiration that brought you to writing that book?
Yeah, what I realized was that a lot of people are stuck in a PhD program, sometimes for 10 years, more than 10 years, like really way past when they should be. And, personally, when I was in graduate school and later as a postdoctoral fellow, I saw students say, okay, next year I'm going to graduate. And at the end of every year, it was like next year and next year. And I thought about, why is this the case? These are intelligent people. They have good mentors. Why are they stuck in school? And it occurred to me that they don't have a plan really, that they just kind of go into it without really, it's very fuzzy. And the inspiration behind the book was that if you have a plan, just a couple of pieces, a couple of structural elements, you can really speed up the process. You can communicate better with your advisor, and you can prevent a lot of the mistakes that keep people stuck in school for a long time.
Oh, I think that's so powerful. And essentially what you created was a resource that may have been very helpful to yourself. So it's a great way to kind of reach back and pay it forward to those that are, coming up. You were open in our conversation, before this call about mental health challenges that you had, during the process of getting your PhD. How did that vulnerability shape the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when the book was published in 2009, they didn't really talk much about mental health challenges in graduate school. That has since changed. But while researching the book, I discovered that about 1 in 4 graduate students report having mental health challenges. And those are just the ones who report it.
Right.
The ones who experience it is probably much higher. So by being vulnerable about this, it helps students feel more open about it, more like they were not alone, and it helped them to get help for the situations they were in.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to a much bigger impact that you've had overall. Because while it's one thing to have some sort of guide to help you successfully make your way through your PhD and to have that accomplishment, I think it's a whole other thing to do that mentally
Hmm.
taken care of.
Yeah.
And so to have both and to have a resource that like kind of helps you feel seen and heard and maybe gives
Hmm.
you the courage or the motivation to speak out or to acknowledge some of those mental health challenges,
Hmm.
I think is really powerful. And I think it's a really cool thing that the book has been able to give back to that community.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, what did that experience teach you about trusting your intuition over, say, like external formulas?
Yeah, what that taught me is to really go with my gut feeling. I mean, it's not something that I was taught because I do come from science and engineering, which is a very
Mhm.
logical field. Everything has to be proven. You need proof for everything. And it didn't seem logical for me after finishing my PhD in science and engineering to then embark in writing a book. And actually, I started writing the book when I was pregnant with my first child. So, there's like a lot going on, right? So
Yeah.
actually, most of my book, so it was published when my younger daughter was like 2 years old. Like I was writing the book during my busiest time
Wow.
as a mom, which seems very counterintuitive. But actually, it was a really good time to write it because I found little spots during the day and I wrote it. But that's what taught me to go with my intuition. Like it seemed like the worst time, but it actually ended up being a good time to write it.
Well, let me something that came about when you were talking here is that so from my working with you, you're very open to helping others, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you're always great about offering your assistance to others. But when you're going through your PhD at the time, I wondered, did you well, going back and reflecting, did you find that there was a cultural challenge where you're in a very competitive,
Mhm.
one of the best schools in the country,
Mhm.
science, everyone's just kind of like just work through it. It's a, we're all hard.
Mhm.
So do you find, I mean, maybe things have changed, but did you, looking
Mhm.
back, do you think that was there a cultural element that maybe people who listen to this might say, we need to change here?
Yeah, definitely. So when I had my consulting business around helping people finish their PhDs, I would go to these networking events and I would tell them what I was doing, and they said, "Well, if you need help to get through your," some people said, "if you need help to get through your PhD, you shouldn't be doing your PhD." Like that's like an old school mindset that
Yeah.
you should be able to get through it without any help, and if you can't, then that's not the right path for you.
Interesting.
And even though nobody said those words to me when I was going through graduate school, I think that there's just that cultural expectation that all of a sudden you go from undergraduate, where everything is really structured for you, to a graduate program where you're completely independent. Like there's almost like you set your own schedule and you're expected to come up with a completely original research topic. So it's definitely a big jump. But I think since then, a lot has changed and there's a lot more support and structure for students.
That's good. And I'm glad that, that's the impression that
Mhm.
it's evolving, I hope, over time. And, Bryon, you mentioned the book that you're reading about embracing fear, accepting fear, or something
The
like
gift
that.
of fear. Yeah. Yeah.
Fear. And it's makes me think about like listening to your intuition. And while it's something that we have, all of us, it's something that I think a lot of people dismiss. And so
Mhm.
I'm curious why you think so many people dismiss their intuition.
I think we've been taught to focus on logic. Like our entire education is all built around logic. Like this is what we have proof for. But what's interesting is when I go to book readings for my books and I talk about intuition and I share some intuitive experiences, especially as a parent, and I asked, okay, who else had intuitive insights about their kids, about when they needed to go to the doctor or about their pets? And, everybody raises their hand because most parents or pet owners, they just know when they need to take their
Yeah.
child or pet to the doctor. Like, so those are really good examples of intuitive insights where people actually listen because someone we love needs help.
That's so interesting. And I think it's so applicable in the sense that it often is so much easier for us to do something for someone else, especially someone we care so much about, and not for yourself. So you've talked a bit about, rewriting your story and storytelling. How do intuition and storytelling intersect for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what they have in common is that they're both self-referential. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So my two books, my two novels, they were written intuitively. So when I sat down to write them, I only had a very vague idea of what the plot was, what the tension was. I actually took a writing course on how to write intuitively. And I just started writing it, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen more than 2 sentences ahead. Basically, the book was written as I was writing it. Or when I went out on walks and had intuitive insights. And so the storytelling, when you tell your own stories, you want to be self-referential. You don't want to emulate somebody else. You don't want to write like somebody else. You don't want to sound like somebody else. You can find your own voice by just writing and telling your story. So that's where the two intersect, that they both come from you.
I was thinking about the intuition thing, and I just, the intuitive part of it, you because you come from an engineering or a science background, and it's logic. And I just thought, there's interesting that there's a famous chess player, Magnus Carlsen. He's one of the best chess players in the world. And when asked about how he plays chess, he has an intuition about which move he's going to make. And he goes, he knows that's right. But then he goes back and he does go through the logic. The logic kind of gets in the way. He knows all the rules of chess, and then he uses his logic to verify his intuition. And you're talking about intuition, and I think almost in a different way I've never even heard it talked about. Like, you're intuitively writing. You're just going with the flow. Like, are you in like a flow state? You're kind of like just following your own journey as you're creating it in your head. That's a different way I've heard. I haven't heard it described that way before. That's interesting. Yeah,
it is. I mean, when I write a story, I literally make it up as I write it, but there's usually a theme. So, I don't just write random things. Like, there's like a lot of journaling exercises where you do a brain dump. That's not what I do. So there's some kind of theme. So, for example, when I wrote Choice, I knew going into the book that it was going to be about a single mom who fights against all odds to keep her only child, going through a divorce, a custody battle. And I knew that I was going to talk about that we all have the power to choose our focus. We can either focus on our fears or focus on what we love to create. So I knew those things. And then I just started writing. So I was focusing on that theme, but I asked myself, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? And I was just listening. Oh yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. So that's kind of how it evolved. And many times it sounded absolutely crazy to me. That's the other thing about intuition, because I wrote the entire draft and then something felt off. And then I heard a voice say, well, half the point of view has to be from the service dog of the main character. I'm like, oh my God, I have to rewrite this whole thing. And that the service dog's point of view was what gave the story flavor, because that's not something you find in a lot of books. So half the book is every other chapter is written from the service dog's point of view. And it was just like something that came to me, and it's people love the service dog. They just love her voice. She's very sassy. They're very sassy. So that's what gives it flavor.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting to the concept. I guess I made assumptions about authors and how there's always this like plan, or they already know the ending or something. And so this idea that you're just kind of letting it be flowy and so authentic is so cool. That you're able to do that.
Yeah.
So I want to shift for a moment to talk about your work at Connex Ecommerce, because you helped them shift the company's story from a data syncing tool to a human founder narrative.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that and why that shift mattered or was so important?
Yeah. I'd be happy to talk about that. So our founder, Joe Anderson, he founded the company in 2010, and it was a data syncing tool between QuickBooks and e-commerce marketplaces. And at the time, I think we were the only solution for certain use cases. So really all we had to do was have a listing on an app store and people came to us because there wasn't much else. But over time, I joined the company in 2020. Over time, there were competitors and it was much more difficult to stand out in the market. We all sounded the same. Oh, yes, our software can do this. Our software can do that better. But that's not really a good enough differentiator that you can do something a little bit better. And so when I started working with Joe, I heard him talk about the fact that he started his business with a $20 investment. Like, oh, yeah, I still have the deposit slip from the bank, right? $20. And he grew it into a multi-million-dollar business. And he has a very interesting personal story about how he didn't have venture capital. He just had a corded phone that he picked up, And I said, you really need to put this into a book. Like, how did you actually go from $20 to multi-million? Because we hear these success stories, but nobody talks about how you actually did it. So I helped him to write a book. He wrote down his ideas. I structured it into 7 different chapters. So he published his first book, The $20 SaaS Company, a couple of years ago. And it really shows that our company has a mission. It's not just about syncing data. It's about freeing people from the pain of manual data entry. Mm-hmm. And it also helps people to distinguish what can a machine do and what does a human need to do, which is really important in the age of AI. So we're very aware of these social situations, and that's what makes our company much more human and relatable.
Yeah. And I would assume that, is helpful in building trust and authenticity with, the people that you're trying to reach as well. So if you were to, broaden this concept for those that are listening in, can you speak to how storytelling works especially well in the B2B space?
Yeah. It really humanizes the conversation. So whenever I go into a conversation with someone, I'm in business development, I always want to learn a little bit about them. Like, where are you calling from? I do a little bit of reading about them up front because we're all human. We all have families. We all have situations. And when you tell a relatable story, then people are much more likely to be engaged with you in the conversation. Because if you just tell them the lesson, it just goes in one ear out the other. They can't relate to it. But when you tell it through a story, that's going to land because that's how our brains are built. Like we engage with stories, and so we're going to remember it.
No, absolutely. And I've read, a lot lately about, this was very common in B2C. And not as common in B2B in the past. Yeah. And so there's a lot of information coming out now about how B2B really needs to adopt this and how B2B is adopting it because of that. Because at the end of the day, even in a B2B environment, the consumer is still a person and people want to buy from people. They want to connect with people. Exactly. And I imagine the deeper we go into the world of AI, the more people are going to crave that human connection. And therefore, I assume the storytelling component is going to be, only more important going forward.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, how do you think leaders can use storytelling to help build culture and connection, within their company?
I think that stories are a great way to bring teams together. So, for example, if you have a team building meeting, if you're just focused on, oh, this is the project we need to get done, let's do A, B, and C, people will contribute, but they're not really that engaged. But if you tell a story, you can share with your team, this is where I'm coming from. For example, Joe always shares that his mom was in manual data entry for decades and how that impacted his life. And that makes his story very memorable. And employees want to know where is the leader coming from? What's his motivation? What's his why? And when you tell a story, then people understand your why. And that's when they're going to be much more engaged in the project. They're going to go the extra mile. They're going to get more creative. That's the other thing. It unlocks creativity. So I think storytelling is a great way to get everybody on the same page and focused on the same mission.
I think, something that you mentioned here is, explaining the why. And so I think it's also important for leaders to know their why and explore that a bit, And that may be, a good first step into kind of figuring out what that story would be to share. Bryon, I feel like that's something you do well here at Ayuvo as well.
It really resonated with me. What you said is around, I think if you have a why and like Joe, if you share your why, I think it empowers people saying, I like that why. I want to be part of that why. I want to do something. And, the why is typically bigger than we want to, we want to sell more syncing data. We want to empower, we want to help people in some way, whatever it may be, whatever the why is. I think that's gets people on board, and everyone's swimming in the same direction, but feeling good about it. I think that's, so I think that's very powerful what you said.
Have you ever experienced leaders that you've worked with maybe finding that level of vulnerability uncomfortable, as far as, being afraid or just uncomfortable to share their story or their why? You're speaking about Joe and sharing, personal information about his family. And, do you think that's a block for some people, or do you find that it's just something that comes easily enough once they know that that's like something that can be beneficial within the company?
Oh, I think it's very scary to be vulnerable. People don't want to get emotional in front of an audience.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's very scary. And also people are not really sure, what does vulnerability mean? How much do I need to share? There's a spectrum. How much?
Yeah.
So with vulnerability, my take on it is that you only need to share as much as is necessary for the audience. You don't need to share all the details, but just opening up a little bit about what you went through, that you're also human, that you had these challenges, is often enough. So I think that the reason a lot of leaders are not vulnerable is, well, first, they may not even know that that's useful.
Right.
Second, they don't know how much to share. And third, it is hard. It is hard to be vulnerable in front of an audience. But if you are able to do that, that's actually going to break through a lot of the barriers. I think that's the best icebreaker, is vulnerability.
For listeners who may be thinking that intuition sounds too abstract, how can they access their intuition practically?
It's actually not as difficult as it sounds, because we all have it. We all have intuitive insights. Just some people are more in tune with it. They hear it more. But I think we've all heard stories about people getting ideas in the shower. It's because we usually don't do work there.
Yeah.
Like we're tuned out. So when we step away from our computer, there's a part of our brain that is still working through that problem. And there are other parts of our brain that become more active. And so when we go out on a walk or do something else, there are ideas that are connected in our minds. And that's how we come up with intuitive insights. So I think that for listeners, if you go on a walk, if you go on a run, if you go to a dance class, just go outside away from your computer. I think you'll find that you will get intuitive insights about something. It may not be what you're looking for necessarily in that moment, but you will get something.
Yeah, it sounds like it's also, this is, Jess, we had a podcast earlier, and there's such similarities in this where life, right, is so busy all the time, and you're go, and being, looking at your history, Dora, you get stuff done, right? And there's always that, but taking that time to go for a walk, taking that time to maybe take an extra long shower. A shower is that's my super spot right there. Like I'm always like, oh yes, this is what I need to do. So those moments to quiet your mind a little bit, and maybe things come to you easier, or it would help the audience here, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely something I find I've struggled with, trying to force myself to take that step back and to walk away. But my husband and I recently got a puppy, and it's forcing that on me. He needs to have Gracie to go outside, and it's been so helpful. Just the fresh air alone on such a consistent basis. I think, especially working from home, working on a computer, there easily could be a day where I hadn't stepped outside, gotten fresh air. In the winter. Yeah. So I think that's so true. So you've talked about, moments of stillness and creative play. And it kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Bryon, and why are those, so powerful?
Those moments of stillness are really powerful because that's when we can hear our insights. If we're always go, 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 then there isn't really space for anything new. We're just going through our to-do list, just checking things off. So where is there room for creativity? There isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find is that when I do take a break from my computer, I usually find a shortcut. Like that's what's interesting. Like it almost feels like I have more hours in the day when I take the time off because I just get more done. I don't know how it works exactly, but like I find like I'm trying to get to an end result. I'm not trying to just go through a to-do list. I'm trying to achieve something. I want to write my speech. I want to submit this proposal, etc. And when I go on a walk and I get an idea, I'm like, oh, okay, I can just do it this way. And it's like a shortcut. So that's how it can actually save us time.
And when we speak about creative play for adults,
Mm-hmm.
what does that actually mean?
I think it's very person dependent. So for some people, it's very physical, like they want to go out dance. Some people like to paint or play cards, games. So I think we all have an answer. Like if you ask yourself, what is creative play for me? You'll get an answer. Like, like that's what I meant by being self-referential. Like you ask yourself and most likely you'll come up with a memory from when you were 8.
Yeah.
Like whatever you like to do as a child is probably something you'd enjoy now.
Well, and Dora, I know that we spoke in the past that you mentioned one of your creative play is painting.
Yes.
Right. So I can imagine. So, do you find getting lost in painting, do you get those intuitions during that time, or are you focused on painting that thing you're doing? Are they singular, or does that open your mind?
It definitely opens my mind. Yeah, I think I wrote an article once about feeling really stuck in the book that I'm writing right now. Like I just felt like it's a dead end, like this book isn't going anywhere. And then my intuition told me to start painting like a pink lily or something like that. And so I found a tutorial and started painting. And as I was painting, it's kind of repetitive. It's not doesn't really require that much paint. Well, it depends on the kind of painting you do, but what I was doing was a bit repetitive. And as I was painting, I got these ideas of how to continue the story, and I was able to continue it. And in my article, I wrote that I was writing the book without being in front of the computer. I was just writing it in my head and getting these ideas. And now I'm almost done with it. So it really just helped to dislodge this block, the painting. So that was great.
That is, and that's exciting to hear that you're almost finished with it. So
Yes.
Congrats on that progress. It's interesting to me talking about, creative play. In my past life, I was an early education teacher. Mm-hmm. And so there was science behind the need to involve play with early childhood education. And unfortunately, it's something that you really lose as you go along in the educational system. And then as we become adults, life gets really serious and we, lean more into that logic and less into the intuition, less into play and creativity. With your background, I'd love for you to speak to that science behind all of, what you're talking about when it comes to intuition.
Yeah, I think when we go out and play, whatever that means for us, whether it's painting, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's playing with our kids or our dog, it's basically just a way for us to have unstructured time and give space to those ideas to congeal in our brains. So it's just a way for us to practice creativity. And it's unfortunately something that a lot of people lose as they go through life.
Right.
But it's always there. And what I find most amazing is that you don't need a lot of it. Like you really only need a little bit. For example, if you do 15 minutes of something that you really love, like that can actually dislodge those creative blocks. So you don't have to feel like, oh, now I need to commit to this painting class for hours every week. I think I was only painting for about 15 minutes when I had an idea of what to write in my book. So just a little bit really makes a difference.
So Jess, I think we all need to go have a recess, right? Like in school.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to write that into our journey at IUVO. Everybody has recess. So Dora, you have your PhD in bioengineering. Can you dive into the science behind intuition and just kind of demystify that for us a little bit?
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying before about when you take a break, when you stop focusing on what's in front of you, then there's a part of your brain called the default mode network that becomes more active. And this part of your brain can help you to connect the dots where normally logically those dots wouldn't have been connected. So, for example, going back to my PhD, I had these conflicting data sets. Well, how do I put that into my dissertation? And then I had this idea, well, if I look at the different experimental conditions, then that will explain why the data didn't match up. But I didn't get that idea while I was just staring at the data. But when I stepped away, I went on a walk. I remember looking at the trees. I was writing my dissertation in the spring. We had some beautiful days here in Boston. And I remember I connected those dots because that part of my brain, the default mode network, started coming up with these ideas. And there is scientific proof for what that part of the brain can do.
I think that's powerful to know that, this is so much more than something that's like nice to talk about. Like there's actually science behind it that backs and supports, what you're talking about here. So how do you think leaders then can model intuitive decision-making within their companies?
I think it's really important for leaders to not just react, but to really take space to respond to whatever is happening around them. For example, I know a lot of leaders, when they're faced with a crisis type of situation, they go on a walk. They go on a walk and they allow the answers to come to them, because when there's a crisis, you feel very emotional. There's a lot of information, a lot of things coming at you. And in that moment, it's very difficult to make a decision. So most likely you'd make a decision from the logical part of your brain, but you're actually missing a lot of the information. But when you go on a walk, you're allowing all of those ideas to congeal, and you're using the different parts of your brain so you can come up with an idea that will address all those concerns. And I actually do know of leaders who were able to resolve very difficult problems just when they were going on walks. I think Charles Darwin, for example, he got his ideas when going on walks. So,
oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard Steve Jobs very similarly. Like, we got to go for walks with people, or go walks, or and to think about that. I actually similar. I'm not going to compare myself to some of these great inventors, but I will find I often tell myself after I go for a walk, I should do that more often. And because of whatever it does to my brain, or even just blood flowing through your system, walking. I used to see a lot of people walking, and I didn't quite understand it until I started experiencing it. So yeah, I look through my window and everybody's walking, and now I know it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, and I think there's stories of great leaders like Bill Gates, who takes 2 weeks off just to think. So there are a lot of examples of leaders who just take that space to think, and that's how they come up with these intuitive insights and ideas.
Yeah, it makes me, think about the culture of a company and how important it would be for, a company to have such a strong culture in order to support employees being able to make intuitive decisions.
Yeah.
Because you need a culture that's going to support you saying, I'm recognizing that I've hit a wall, or that I need to take a break and take a step back and go for a walk, or do whatever it is that, feeds that, creativity for them individually. And that also requires trust and empowerment. And so, Bryon, I know that's something that you're really passionate about. I'd love to hear, your thoughts around that.
Yeah, well, you kind of said it all very well there yourself there, but I think if you as a leader, if you trust your people to do the right things, and know, like, hey, you know what, they need to go for a walk, or maybe they want to take their dog for a walk, or maybe sometimes we have this funny phrase at Ayuvo. Somebody says, "I've got potato brain. I got to go for a walk, or I got to do whatever," right? And they realize that however they are right now, they're just not being productive. And so they, I think it's funny. They don't even have to tell us they're doing it. Just like I love, I just picture these potatoes growing out of their brain. So, but I think you have to have a culture that says that's okay. And that you're not like, and that we only have so much capacity, and you'll do your best work if you feel like, A, I'm supported, and B, I can find that space that's going to allow me to do my best work. And it may not be at the time that's good for everybody else, but so I think I'm just elaborating what you said, Jess. You said it very succinctly, and that's and I like that.
Thanks, Ryan. So, Dora, something that, I talk a lot about is imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to get your thoughts on how storytelling can actually help reduce imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that when leaders tell stories, then they need to be at least a little bit vulnerable, right? Like when you tell a story. And when you're vulnerable, it helps other people to open up as well and to share as well. And when they do that, then you realize that we're all in the same boat here. We all have our insecurities. Many times we feel like we're not good enough, that we're not doing as well as we could. So then the imposter syndrome kind of becomes like a moot point, because like if we all feel like we don't belong here, then we all belong here, right? So just by people opening up to each other, it definitely reduces that imposter syndrome that many of us feel.
Definitely. And I will say an impact you've had on me already, when we chatted first and you mentioned that statement of, change your story, you change your life.
Yeah.
It really resonated with me in this. I think sometimes, it's easy to have a feeling, and you're not even naming the feeling. It's like this uncomfortable feeling in your body, and then, I found that with that statement, I'm almost able to pause and ask myself, like, what is the story I'm telling myself in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And when I acknowledge it and I see it, then I feel like I'm empowered to rewrite it and to look at it more clearly. So, that is one way that just, talking with you has helped me with imposter syndrome, is just kind of reframing the way I look at it through the story lens.
Yeah, that's incredible. In fact, just being aware of the story that you tell yourself is already very empowering, even before you rewrite it. So I'm really glad that was helpful.
Absolutely.
Well, and knowing both of you a little bit, I see such similarities about, Jess, you were a teacher. You and you had a passion for marketing, came to marketing. Dora, you were in biomedical engineering, and and now you're leading an e-commerce team and writing books, and part of telling yourself stories is you're creating your stories, right? You're literally writing the next chapter of your life, right? So it's amazing.
Yeah, there's so many different paths. And just because you've, started on one path doesn't mean there's not other paths available to you as you go along. So Dora, you're currently writing the third book, as you mentioned, in your trilogy. Yeah. And what are you personally discovering about intuition and narrative right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting because after each book that I wrote, so I published 3, and after each one, I felt like I don't have another book in me. Like I'm just out of ideas. There isn't another book in me. And what I'm discovering now is that there's always more. We always have more to share. And as I'm writing this book, there's more stories, more lessons that are coming out. And because I'm writing it intuitively, I didn't know I was going to share that when I was beginning to write the book. So that's really what I want listeners to walk away with, is that there are always more stories inside of us that we can share.
Oh, I love that. I feel like that would have been a line I would have loved to use in the classroom too. That's a very powerful line for learners at any level, I feel. So if there's someone listening or watching right now that feels stuck in a story about themselves, what's one small shift you feel they could make?
I think identifying the story, like you said before, really thinking about, where am I stuck? What is the story that I'm telling myself? And then making a small shift, such as I can go from A to B today, or I can always find people to support me, or I can find the time. Something like that, that's really a small shift, I think is really critical, because it's very difficult to make like a 180 shift, right? Like that's not gonna happen. But if you're able to shift your trajectory by 1 degree, then over a long period of time, you're gonna be on a completely different path. And I think when people realize that you just have to make these tiny shifts, then it's easier to implement those changes.
I wanted to bring up something that I recently learned about Dora that I'm so fascinated by. And I met Dora We go to the same gym, and then we also happen to be in the same Toastmasters,
Yes.
where we give speeches and we practice our oration and so forth. And Dora is currently in the third level of a competition right now to be
Wow.
so she's won twice now, and so she's going. Matter of fact, I think it's tomorrow, right? Tomorrow
It
you're going
is. Yes.
to competing
Yes.
again. And so one of the reasons one we're talking about this, but one superpower Dora really has is she really tells stories very well. And I'm frankly, I was a little jealous because she does not only does this, but she memorizes these things. And I'm always, and I try to speak, and I'm like, and I get down to like 3 or 4 bullets, and I'm always thinking I'm going to forget this thing, and I realize nobody's going to know if I forgot this, but that's okay. But it's very apparent that you're telling a story, and it seems like it's very eloquent. And I know that you do in Toastmasters, you do a lot of work to prepare to
Yeah.
make it look like this happens. But what I recently learned from one of your posts is that you are in memory competitions.
Yes. Yes. It's true.
And you,
True.
so tell me about that's a journey that I'm fascinated by.
Yes, yes, I'd be happy to. So actually, I started that journey because my memory started slipping after I turned 40. I mean, most people experience this little slips here, little slips there. It got kind of bad for me where I left a bag of groceries in the car overnight. I think that was my breaking point. I can't do this anymore. Like, I have to find a solution. And my intuition somehow led me to these memory experts who have courses on how to improve your memory. And at first I was just like, okay, I'm just going to do these. They're like mnemonic techniques where like you do things around the house so that you remember where your keys are and reminders. So it started out just by like, I just want to get through my to-do list. I was a single parent, and I just want to be able to get through my day without dropping too many balls. Like, that's literally how it started. But the people who wrote these books were actually memory champions. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how do they do these things? And I don't know how exactly I started to compete, but I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just going to give it a shot because it sounds fun. And so when you memorize anything, like digits of pi, which, I can memorize hundreds of digits of pi. It's actually not, I don't memorize the digits. It's actually, I convert it into images. Like you learn how to convert anything into images. And so it trains your creative powers, like your creative imagery. So these memory competitions is all about how quickly you can translate information into a story, into a story in your mind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And now I
Yeah.
want to try it.
Yeah, I thought that.
I was actually thinking about holding workshops on this because like it's actually really fun. It's so fun. And sometimes people retire from these competitions and they're like, but I really miss it. Like, so it's just
Yeah.
a very cool thing.
I mean, I thought for our listeners, they're talking about techniques and the science of intuition and storytelling, and then memory, and they're all tied together in the way you've constructed
Yeah.
this. And I think our listeners can take a lot from this conversation of how just take one of those components. And it'll be. I think you'll be better off.
Yeah, I mean, just this morning, actually, I had it's an online competition. So just this morning, I had one, and it's just like a lot of fun. Like, it just kind of fun way to something fun to do during the day, I guess. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Fun, but also functional, right? Like it's exercising a very important muscle.
Yeah, it is. It is like exercise for your brain. So when I don't do it, it's the same feeling as when I don't go to the gym. It really does feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like you could argue it's just as important to make sure you're exercising your mind as it is exercising your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, especially with AI automating everything and almost thinking for us on so many levels, having the ability to purposefully set aside time to exercise your brain, I think is so important.
Yeah, my kids who are 18 and 20, they really stay away from AI because they're like, well, we don't want to outsource our thinking. And I'm really proud of them for saying
Yeah.
that because I think there have been studies that show that people who use AI a lot, parts of their brain actually shrink. Like I think that
Wow.
they've seen that. Like I've heard that from somebody who is a thought leader in AI right now. So yeah, it is really important to not get too much help.
So, Dora, we do have a question for you to end our segment here. And since you are a first time guest and hopefully you will be on repeat episodes, we would love for you to share a fun fact about you that might surprise people.
Yeah, so one fun fact is that by the time I was 11, I had gone to school in 3 different countries and had to learn in 3 different languages.
Wow.
So I was born in Hungary, but when I was 1, we went to Mexico for 5 years. So I went to preschool there until I was 6. Then at 6, we went back to Hungary. From 6 to 11, I went to a Hungarian school. And then at 11, we went to New York. So I learned in Spanish, English, and Hungarian, these 3 languages. So it's definitely made me aware of other cultures and other people. And I think that's what fueled my curiosity because these 3 countries are very, very different culturally.
Yeah.
And when I lived in Hungary, it was still communist. So, so going from communist Hungary to the US was definitely a big shift. And they're both very different from Mexico.
Yeah.
That's what, and actually the Mexican experience is the cultural setting for my novels.
True. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this experience is what made me very curious about people and different cultures.
I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dora, this conversation has been both practical and empowering. I know there are listeners out there who want to explore your books and work more deeply. So where can people connect with you the best, find your books, or learn more about your work?
DoraFarkas.com, just my name.com. It's simple.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. So if anybody's looking at the notes, we will find a great way to find you. That's perfect.
Yes, we will link that as well as information about your books in the show notes too. So today's conversation reminds us that the stories we carry are powerful, but they're not permanent. And intuition isn't mystical or reserved for a few. It's accessible in everyday moments of stillness and creativity. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and visit ayuvotech.com for more conversations at the intersection of leadership, culture, and growth.
And whether you're leading a company, navigating a career pivot, or questioning the story you've been telling yourself, remember, alignment starts internally. And thanks for listening. And until next time, stay curious.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to The Edge of Excellence. We hope today's insights empower you to shape your future and rise to your full potential. Let's continue to grow, innovate, and lead, pushing the boundaries of excellence.